one last thing that I want to get into in terms of an advantage, and there might be others that come up organically, but something that you talked about at the Gen AI Collective pitch day that I was at in San Francisco in December was token efficiency, which was something that was really surprising to me. It was something that I hadn't thought about at all, that you could actually create a language like BAML to allow your your inputs and your outputs to, say, an LLM be much more token efficient. So tell us a bit about that and how that can lead to major operational cost savings.
Yeah. And this was really inspired by just having spent like 10 years doing performance optimizations and like hand rolling assembly for a while. And what I really learned in that journey was I was a pretty damn good performance engineer. But the compiler beat me every time. Not because it wrote better code than me, but because just on a time per dollar value, the compiler could, in the same amount of time, optimize way more code than what I could do. So it made sense for me to optimize some parts of the code, but not all of the code. And the thing with prompting and token efficiency, we have a similar take. You should probably hyper optimize one or two of the prompts that are super, super critical to you. But for 90% of the prompts, you just want something to do a really damn good job at it. And what we thought about with performance optimization is the idea of like, one, everyone is using structured outputs. And structured outputs is this idea where, or function calling, is this idea where an LLM is given a bunch of tools. Let's say I give it access to the weather API, and it's described the weather API takes in either a zip code or a city and a state. And then the LLM also has access to a restaurant booker, where it has to take in the name of the restaurant and its address of some kind. And then lastly, it gets a restaurant, restaurant finder or something, where I give it, again, a city and state. And I ask the model, what's the weather today? It should pick out the restaurant tool and fill out the parameters based on whatever context it provided. And the idea of that is the best way to send that data between the model and your software today is JSON. JSON, as we talked about earlier, has a bunch of likes and ums. And it doesn't make sense that we're going to enforce the model to follow this standard that we've built that was amazing for web development with all these quotation marks, this strictness in its definition of you have to have that quotation mark there. You have to only have single line strings. You can't even put comments inside of a JSON file. And to us, what we said was, what if there was a different format? So what we did is we spent about 8 months writing a new algorithm called schema-aligned parsing, which is actually able to take the model's response and automatically infer it to be the data model that you provided it against. So if it made some mistakes, like it forgot the quotation marks around your data model, it forgot a comma at the end of a line, it gave you a string when you expected a number. All sorts of mistakes that models will make because they're probabilistic in nature. We algorithmically correct for that in under 5 milliseconds. And again, not saying that it's perfect, but it does the same thing that C compiler does, which is it just does it more often, more correctly than I do.
Nice. And then so by having token efficiency, even if it's, I don't know, like, so on average, what do you think it's like? It saves you maybe like 10% in terms of the
We've
number of
seen
tokens and that
customers
kind
save
of.
like 20 to 30% tokens easily on
Oh,
outputs.
really?
Yeah. So it's a lot faster.
Oh, wow.
But I think one thing that's overlooked is not just that it's faster and cheaper, but the fact that it works with every existing model. So like DeepSeek R1 came out recently, and they released that model without function calling. We have and same with OpenAI's O1 models, they released that without function calling. We have users of BAML using function calling with those models today because schema-aligned parsing requires no modification to the model to be able to make that work.
Wow. That's super cool. That's amazing. So, in addition to that kind of use case there that you just gave, that was a really interesting one with DeepSeek and being able to do tool calling or O1 tool calling. Um, what are some other kind of unexpected or innovative uses of BAML that you've seen from your users?
We've seen, I think, one cool use case that I've seen is this company that's making Cursor, but for Xcode. Because obviously, if you're in the Mac world, you have to use their own proprietary tools. And knowing Apple, they're probably going to take forever to build anything like it. And one interesting thing that we learned is that you need tool calling to go do these things to build something like Xcode or Cursor. But when you generate code, I don't know if you've ever seen this in Cursor, it always messes up Markdown stuff for me. because it tries to put triple quotes and their parser for some reason doesn't handle that correctly. And if you're generating code diffs inside of JSON blobs, they mess up all the time because you need so many escape characters. Every new line needs to instead be a \n. Every quotation mark needs to be a \quote. But because schema aligned parsing is so flexible, we actually kind of found it funny that they just told the LLM, hey, output my code in triple quotes. And schema aligned parsing took the triple quote text, which doesn't need to be escaped, and just converted into a string, a regular string that is properly escaped. But I think that was one of the coolest things I've seen in a while. A lot of dynamic UIs and a lot of generative UIs that I've been seeing with BAML, those I think have been the coolest, like visual things to experience.
Can you give an example of like a generative UI?
Yeah, it's hard to describe generative UIs, but I'll do my best.
Okay.
Right? Because it's just like a new concept that doesn't really exist in so many places. Let's take the idea of like a recipe generator. When I have a recipe generator, we can all go to ChatGPT and ask it to dump out a recipe. And that'll be fine. It'll do the thing. But what I really want is something which can almost show me cards of here's all the ingredients I have and here's what amount I want. And once the cards are done, then I want to show up and say, hey, there's a separate section for here's the steps that you have to follow, and here's the preparation steps at the end. And wouldn't it be nice if there was a spinner moving along each one of those sections showing exactly what it's currently working on? That sort of stuff is, again, like in the old days of web dev, would take you a lot of things to do, like state management, took you a lot of code to go do. We revealed this new thing called semantic streaming that allows you to have that data available in a type safe way. And like you can just build a UI like that now. And now your chat app all of a sudden can not just respond with text, but you can have dynamic graphs, you can have dynamic modals, and your chat app suddenly stops feeling like ChatGPT. Because if you're out there trying to build a company around chat, I think you have to ask yourself, like, why would my users not just go to ChatGPT?
Right.
And one huge value prop I think you can do is build the best UX for the thing that you are trying to provide. If you're trying to analyze stocks, show me ticker symbols in real time right there. Show me graphs, fun things like that no ChatGPT is just not going to go do.